Okay, so we're going to do a basic clutch design, super easy to construct, and you could knock these out if you're doing an event and need to fill up your booth or table. I've done probably about 15 to 20 in a day. That's how easy and quick they are. So we're going to keep it nice and simple. If you're ready to get started and get all of your pattern pieces together, or your cuts for your pattern together, and the only hardware you're going to need is your zipper and your zipper pull. All right, so I have a certain order of things that I like to complete this clutch in, and to make it go fast and to make sure that I remember all the steps, even though there's only a few. I start with the zipper. You're going to add your zipper pull to your zipper tape. If I can get it added. There we go. It was stuck there on one of the little rings. Just like that. I am going to take my zipper tab and I am going to center my zipper on that tab. And then I'm going to go top stitch the open end close. All right, so with your zipper tab on, I do have my zipper closing to the left. That's just my choice. It's completely up to you how you want it to close. We're going to be able to move this aside, and we're going to grab our slip pocket. Now for these clutches, sometimes I do a zipper pocket, but to keep it quick, I do just a slip pocket. So you're going to take your slip pocket piece, fold it in half. I have some chalk residue on it, but that'll clean off easily. I usually clip it in half, and I'm using waterproof canvas. So if you're using woven materials, you need to sew these right sides together, leave an opening, and flip it to the right side. I'm not going to show you that because again, we're keeping it quick. I also fold this in half to mark the center, and usually a crease is just enough for me to make sure I got the center, but I'm going to add just a little bit of chalk to mark my center. I'm going to grab one of my lining pieces. It should already have the center marked, and then I'm going to line up the mark that I've made on the center of my slip pocket with the center mark of the lining piece, and I'm going to pin this in place. Usually only pin just at the top to hold it in place. I leave my clip on to make sure that these do not move, these edges do not slip. If you need to add another pin towards the bottom, feel free to do so. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch along 3 sides of this pocket. And we need to leave the top open because it is a pocket. So down this side, down across the bottom, and then up this side. Additionally, I will split this slip pocket in 2 by just sewing down the center. All right, so I have my slip pocket added. I have divided the slip pocket in 2. Again, if you want to add a zipper pocket on the other lining piece, feel free to do so, but we're trying to keep this simple and quick. So that way you can have your booth full or do some scrap buster activity, whatever you choose to do, but we'll just keep it quick by doing a slip pocket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of my exterior pieces, set this aside, and your exterior pieces should have the center marked as well at the top. We're going to grab our double-sided tape, and you're also going to grab your ruler and either a pen or chalk. We are going to mark in 3/4 of an inch from each short edge, and we're going to do so. I'm going to have to do so with this blue chalk because it's going to be a little difficult to see. There we go. So I have that mark made, and then I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch in from this side. And you're making the mark on the right side of your exterior. You're now going to add a piece of double-sided tape, and you want thin double-sided tape, nothing more than a 1/4 inch. You're going to add that double-sided tape in between the two lines that you've just created. Go ahead and grab your zipper. We're going to remove the backing to the double-sided tape. And we're going to add our zipper face down with the tab to the right because I want my zipper closing to the left. This is going to be my front of my little pouch or clutch. I'm going to add the tab right at that line that we made, 3/4 of an inch in from the end, and I'm going to stick it to the double-sided tape and then line up the top edge of my zipper all the way down. And of course, it will only stick in the area where we had the double-sided tape, so it's not going to stick at the very end. Once you have that done, you're going to grab your lining piece that doesn't have the slip pocket, the one that's blank. You're going to lay it right sides down, lining up the center marks that you've made on the exterior in your lining piece. And you're going to clip all three of these layers together, the zipper, the exterior, and the lining piece. Now, as I get toward the end with the loose zipper tape, where we have our open end here, I'm not going to clip all the way at the very end just yet. I'm going to flip it over because what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it from this direction, leaving the zipper tape end, loose end, to last. So I'm going to make another mark on my exterior piece, the wrong side, 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch from the end. There you go. And I'm also going to split my zipper tape at the end here, just enough. All right, so now that I have my zipper tail there split apart, I'm going to go ahead and move my clip. So again, I am going to sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance down from this corner of the clutch all the way down until I get to this line mark that I've made, 3/4 of an inch from the edge. Once I get to that mark, I'm going to leave my needle in the down position exactly at that mark. I am going to pull the zipper tape, just half of the zipper tape, to the outside of the pouch. I'm going to put my presser foot back down and I'm going to finish sewing the rest of this. What that helps us do is create a secure end of the zipper. That way it's in the seam allowance and looks like a nice zipper. So we have our closure at the end with the tab, and then we'll be including the zipper into our seam, which is also referenced as or referred to as the Butler method. All right, so let's go get this sewn. And again, make sure that you stop at the 3/4 inch line that you've made from the corner or the side of the clutch with your your needle in that line, right at that line. And then we're going to move that aside as far as we can and continue sewing. Okay, so I have everything pulled aside and sewn, and hopefully you back stitched well over your zipper. We are going to cut that little zipper tail down that's hanging to the outside of our clutch. And now we're going to do top stitching. We are not top stitching the lining to the exterior. Reason being, when you do that and you go to sew up the sides, it creates a, and when you turn it right side out, it creates a hump or bump to where there's a little bit of a fold in on the side of your clutch. It's not a nice flat edge. So no need to top stitch with your lining in place. We're just going to flip back the exterior and we're going to top stitch along the exterior right next to the zipper tape. So let's take this to our sewing machines and top stitch along the exterior. All right, so we have the top stitching done. Looks nice and neat, as it should. So now we're going to grab the other exterior piece. And we are going to repeat that process. We're going to add our lines in 3/4 of an inch from each edge. And then we're going to add double-sided tape between those lines we've just created. Going to remove the backing. And then we're going to take our other exterior piece that already has the zipper attached. We are going to lay it right sides together with this exterior piece. Now what I like to do is make sure that the edges are lined up of the exterior pieces. And then I will move up the exterior piece that's on top until I reach the edge, the top edge, to where I can line up the zipper tape. It helps me to make sure that these are even and lined up well. And if you need to, you can go ahead and pull apart your zipper if it's partially together. Your zipper pull will not come off because you already have half of your zipper tape in the seam. All right, so that's added. So you're going to now grab the other lining piece with the slip pocket, and you are going to lay it right sides together with the lining piece that's on your table. Again, matching up the center marks that you've made and clipping all together, all layers. And remember, you can clip the end with your tail of your zipper tape, but don't clip too close to the end because we need to make a mark there. All right, so as I said before, I like to sew towards the tail of my zipper tape. So I start at the end with the tab first, and then I make it to the zipper tape. So that means that this lining piece, the back of the lining piece with the slip pocket, is going to be on top. And that's the side that I need to make my mark on. And I'm going to use white so it can show up well. 3/4 of an inch from the end is where I'm making my mark. There we go. So now we're going to do as we did before on the front exterior piece. We're going to take this to our sewing machine, sew to 1/4 inch seam allowance. We are stopping with our needle in the mark that we've made, and we will be pulling aside our zipper tape as far as possible and then proceed sewing. But also make sure that you double stitch well over your zipper tape. All right, so we have that all sewn in. Again, we're repeating the same exact steps as we did for the front side exterior and lining. You're gonna snip off the excess zipper tape, and now it's time for us to flip it over. And I like to zip mine up, and then we're going to do some top stitching like we did earlier. So as you can see, you know, with these quick stops, and we're just being repetitive with them, it makes it easy to kind of, you know, knock a couple out or a few out at a time. So let's go ahead and do top stitching, and then we will get to closing this baby up. Okay, now that we have our exterior and lining pieces all sewn together, we are going to add our side connectors. And you're going to do that by taking one of your exterior pieces, it doesn't matter which one, flipping it over so it's wrong side up, and 2 inches down from the seam of where we attached the zipper, we're going to make a mark, again on the wrong side of the exterior piece. 2 inches. And I usually just line my ruler up right with the stitch line of that seam. There we go. So I made both my marks. And we are going to attach our already prepared side connectors to the exterior piece. Now, you can of course make a mark on the right side if you choose to, but you're going to do it with chalk or disappearing ink. But I chose to make it on the wrong side so I can see it, because it's a little difficult to see marks on the right side of my exterior because of the color and the fact that it's textured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ring and my connector. I am going to put them on the front side or right side of the exterior piece, but I'm going to make sure my connector or my ring is facing the center of the exterior piece, and I'm going to put that line center of my connector. So my connector is going to be hanging over the edge by half. I'm going to clip it in place. I'm going to do the same for this side. Make sure it's hanging over by at least half of the connector. Make sure that's centered and clip in place. Now you can choose to leave it clipped, because we're going to end up clipping the exterior sides together to close up this clutch, or you can base stitch them in place. And I am going to go ahead and base stitch it in place to make sure that it doesn't move, wiggle, or not be straight. All right, so I have my side connectors base stitched in place, and now we can start putting together the rest of this bag. So what you're going to do is you are going to make sure that the exterior pieces are to one side and the lining pieces are to the other, and they are going to be right sides together. We are going to line up the seam of the sides first, making sure that this top seam where the zipper's at is lined up. When lining up the seam on this side with the zipper tab, you're going to have to bend your zipper tab in half, and I want you to bend it so that way it is pointing towards the exterior pieces, to the interior or inside of the exterior pieces, and then clip in place. And before we forget, with that in center, we're going to unzip our zipper about 3/4 of the way, so that way we can make sure we can turn our bag right side out when it comes time to do so. And now we're going to clip the rest of our exterior. Oops, I'm always popping clips, I tell you. That's why it's good to get metal clips if possible. And if you buy the cheap clips, just expect to go through them. All right. So I'm gonna finish clipping the exterior together. Okay, and now we're going to clip our lining together. All right, so we have everything clipped together, and we unzipped our zipper, so we won't have a problem turning this right side out. So what you're going to do is you're going to sew your exteriors together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. However, when you cross over to the lining, after passing your zipper tab or your zipper, and you get to the lining, you're going to sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. But make sure that you leave about 4, 5, 6 inches, whatever you think you'll need, based upon your exterior and the stiffness of it. No more than 6 inches open at the bottom of your lining piece, so that way you'll be able to turn your clutch right side out. So again, sew the exterior at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you cross over to your lining, you're going to start at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then when you get back to your exterior, you'll go back to a 1/4 of an inch to close off the stitching. And of course, always make sure to back stitch well over the area that's open next to the zipper, and then at the start and stop of your sewing. All right, so I have sewn my exteriors together and my lining pieces together. I did 4th inch seam allowance on my exterior, increased to 1/2 inch on my lining. Now what we're going to do is we are going to trim down our seam allowances. We're gonna trim off the excess connector tabs. And when we trim down our lining, we are not going to trim down the space that we left open to turn the bag. We're gonna start just beyond that point. And I'm gonna trim it down to about 1/8 of an inch. All the way around. Of course, be very careful not to cut into your stitching. If you do, you have to go and fix it. Alright, so I've got that all trimmed down. And if you have a little bit of space in between your seam and the raw edge of your curved edges, I would do a little snipping around those curved edges. That way we can make sure they're curved, keep that shape when we turn it. If you don't have any room between the raw edge and the seam, you should be okay without clipping. And I'm going to do it on both the lining and the exterior piece. Again, be careful not to cut into your stitching. I trimmed this down pretty close to my seam, so I gotta be extra careful. All right, so now that that's all trimmed down, we can turn our bag through the opening that we left at the bottom of the lining. So I'm going to turn my bag right side out and be right back. Now that I have turned the bag right side out, I am going to work on making sure that all my corners are poked out, as well as the edges where my zipper tab is. And I'm gonna do a little bit of rolling of the seams to make sure that the seams are nice and flat. And I may need to find my bone folder so I can poke out this corner where the zipper tab is at. My fingers aren't working well enough just to poke that out. I'm sorry, I'm not in camera view. How dare I? There we go. So, once that is all poked out, you can stuff your lining back inside if you want, just to see how well your lining fits. And if you feel you need to make adjustments to the lining, pull it back out, turn the bag wrong side out again to do so. You can, but at the 1/2 inch seam allowance, it should fit pretty good. And it does. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to pull out the lining again. So that way we can close up this opening that we left to turn the bag. I'm gonna poke out the corners just a bit so I can see where my seam stopped at the base of the bag. There we go. All right, so we are now going to, and as you can see, because of where you stopped with your seams and backstitched, it already starts to fold in the raw edges on its own. So all we want to do is kind of help it along, fold in those raw edges, and then we're going to clip it in place. Like that. Make sure the seam is evident. There we go. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this to our sewing machine and we are gonna sew that opening closed. You're going to sew as close to the folded in edge as possible to close up that opening. Make sure to backstitch well at the start and stop. All right, so with that opening closed, we can now stuff our lining back into our clutch. Again, poke out those rounded corners. And we are all done. Now all you have to do is just attach either your wristlet, or if you're using it as a crossbody or strap that you want to connect to your side connector rings. Easy peasy. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in again to Clutch Couture Designs, and look forward to seeing you next time.